Welcome back to the Resolution Room, where we turn tension into transformation through clarity, connection, and consistency. I'm your host, Dr. Nashay Lowe, and in this space, we explore what's really underneath the moments that challenge us and how they can lead to something more honest, more human, and more whole. So let's get into it. Today, we're talking about something that slips under the radar in so many of our relationships: micro conflicts. These are the small, subtle moments of tension that we brush off, like eye rolls, being talked over, silence when we expected support, or a tone that cuts just a little too sharp. They're not big blowups, no one storms out, and there's often no apology. But they do add up, and over time, they shape how safe, seen, and valued we feel. In this episode, we'll unpack over the next 4 segments what micro conflicts are, why they matter more than we realize, and how to respond to them before they turn into something bigger. Segment 1. What are micro conflicts? Micro conflicts are everyday moments of misalignment, disrespect, or disconnect that often go unspoken. They sound like the internal dialogue that says, I guess it's not a big deal. I'm probably just overreacting. It's fine, I'll let it go. They show up when someone interrupts you and never circles back. Maybe a quote-unquote joke lands like a jab. A promise gets broken yet again with no acknowledgement. Or when you've been doing the emotional labor to keep the peace, but no one sees that part. Individually, these moments feel small, but collectively, they build stories, they build patterns, and most of all, they build distance. And let's be honest, most of us are taught to ignore them, especially marginalized communities or anyone conditioned to believe they're being too sensitive for speaking up. Psychologist Dr. Thema Bryant calls this silencing the self. In her work on relational trauma, she talks about how many people are conditioned to bypass their own discomfort in order to maintain connection. But disconnection is exactly what starts to grow when these moments accumulate. Micro conflicts are not insignificant. They are information, they are signals, and when we listen, we gain insight into what we need to repair, not just externally, but internally too. Segment 2. Why micro conflicts matter. The reason micro conflicts are so impactful is because they chip away at trust in slow yet quiet ways. Big conflicts are easy to name. They demand attention. But micro conflicts live in the gray area, so they often go unresolved. Let's go over a few examples. In workplaces, perhaps the same person talks over you in meetings, or a supervisor regularly forgets your contributions, or a colleague sends feedback but never asks your input or takes it seriously. In families, maybe one sibling is always the favorite and that pattern gets laughed off. Or someone says, that's just how dad is, when its tone is a little too sharp or dismissive. Or emotional needs are minimized in the name of keeping things light. In friendships, maybe you're always the one initiating, or the same person cancels last minute again. Or you're starting to feel like you're supporting everyone through their hard moments, but no one seems to check in on you. Now, why does this matter? Because over time, the person on the receiving end starts to think, maybe I'm too much. Maybe it's safer just to stay quiet. Or maybe this relationship isn't as mutual as I thought. And from there, we don't just withdraw from that moment, we withdraw from the connection. According to Gottman Institute's research on long-term relationships, it's not the explosive arguments that predict relational failure. It's the slow erosion caused by things like criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Micro conflicts are often early indicators of these patterns. And because they don't cause immediate fallout, we tell ourselves they're no big deal. But they become big, quietly, gradually, and sometimes permanently. Segment 3. How to recognize and name micro conflicts. So how do we recognize them? You start by tuning into yourself. Do you feel emotionally smaller after certain interactions? Do you replay a moment hours or days later, still wishing you'd said something? Do you dread certain meetings or people, not because of obvious harm, but because something always feels off? Or do you feel like you're walking on eggshells even though nothing quote unquote big has happened yet? If so, you might be experiencing microconflict, and naming it is the first step to clarity. And here's what naming that can sound like. I noticed I felt dismissed when my idea was brushed off. That joke didn't sit quite right with me. When I'm always the one reaching out, it starts to feel one-sided. This isn't about making a moment more dramatic than it is. It's about honoring your reality before it turns into resentment. Dr. Mark Brackett, a Yale researcher and the author of Permission to Feel, reminds us that naming emotions, especially subtle ones, is essential to emotional regulation and healthy connection. As they say, if you can name it, you can tame it. That same principle applies here. If you can name the microconflict, you give yourself and others a chance to respond rather than repeat the pattern unconsciously. Segment 4, preventing escalation through curiosity. Here's the truth. Most microconflicts aren't malicious. They're habits, they're blind spots, and they're inherited patterns we've never paused to question. So when we meet those moments, not with accusation, but curiosity, we create the conditions for change. Try asking yourself, is there something I'm not seeing about how we're relating here? Is there something I'm missing about the way we're understanding each other's point of view? Have we fallen into a pattern that doesn't feel good to either of us? Can we figure out what's underneath this so that we can show up differently? Curiosity disarms defensiveness. It invites dialogue, and it makes it safe to name something without turning it into a full confrontation. In the workplace, this may look like asking a colleague, can we check in about how we're collaborating on this project? I've noticed a pattern, and I want to make sure that we're both okay with it. Or in a relationship, it can sound like, I've been feeling a little disconnected lately, and I want to understand what's happening for both of us. These aren't confrontation openers, they're connection openers. So I'll leave you with this. If you're feeling disconnected or uncertain in a relationship, personal or professional, don't wait for a crisis to call attention to it. Pay attention to the small moments because they hold big information. Because microconflicts, they're the quiet pages of the story you're writing with someone else. And if you read closely, you might find a chance to edit the chapter before it becomes a wound. Don't underestimate the power of a check-in. Don't ignore your gut when something feels off, and don't assume the small things don't matter. Because in relationships, it's always the small things that become everything. As always, I want to thank you for joining me today in the Resolution Room. I'm grateful that you're here doing this quiet, important work alongside of me. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to please share. And until next time, keep building in the quiet because that's what will carry you forward.